Juneteenth. It's a holiday often called the Black 4th of July. It's celebrated with cookouts, festivals, historical reenactments, and it's one of the most important days in African American history. Juneteenth celebrates the end of slavery in the United States. You see, the U.S. Declaration of Independence stated that all men were created equal, but this didn't apply to black slaves. The move to end slavery didn't happen until Abraham Lincoln issued a law in 1863, almost 100 years later. But the news took more than 2 years to reach all parts of the country. The state of Texas was the last to find out. On June 19, 1865, 250,000 slaves were freed in Texas, marking independence for all Americans.
We've all been hurt at some point, even abandoned. Many of us have done the hurting ourselves. We get to the point where we don't trust anyone, nor do we feel worthy of being loved by anyone. Then there's that one person who just doesn't give up on loving you. Their love is unconditional. Their love stays long enough for you to heal. And then they promise to never leave. That's love you can count on. God's love.
Hey everyone, this is Dr. David Evans, the president of PIC TV Network. We on once again our news network all over the world. Certainly, we're happy for our audience, those who are watching with us again and again from all over the world. We're so happy for you to be with us on our News World presentation. You know, I always want to say thank you again for our viewers in Brazil, France, Argentina, Nicaragua, United States, Colombia, Mexico, Guatemala, United Kingdom is in the house with Allison. Hey, Germany, Panama, Ireland, Peru, Chile, Costa Rica, and everybody's watching all over the world through the PIC TV network. We're excited to bring you a news presentation today, which is so awesome. And I am so honored because we have some great people in our team today who's watching with us all the way from New York. Hey, how you doing?
How are you? How are you? How are you? Patricia Frudenberg here from New York. How you doing? Over to Allison now. How are you, Allison?
I'm well, thank you. I'm Allison from London, England. Good evening, everyone. Over to you, Michelle.
Michelle? Take you off mute, Michelle. Come off mute.
And I'm Michelle, the computer lady from Atlanta, Georgia. And then, do we have Coach up yet?
Yeah, Coach. I think Coach came out, but we're going to beam it in from California. We have Nicole. She just came in from California. I asked her to come on from all the way from California, just popping in to say howdy doody. How you doing out there, Nicole?
Hello, everybody. My name is Nicole Burns, and I'm here in California.
So we're happy to beam this broadcast all over the world today. And also, we're so happy for Coach. She just came off for a minute, but she'll be back on from down in Atlanta, Georgia. You know, we are so happy and honored today because our topic today is in the fourth series. You know, we've been so blessed to talk about reconnecting the generation. There's so many people in our generation who have gotten so many beautiful opportunities to have traditional legacies placed in our life, you know, and we never want to forget the old landmark, the things that mama and daddy, auntie and uncle taught us, you know. So whole reason of this news presentation tonight, reconnecting the generation. There's a lost generation, there's a broken generation. Something happened between our generation and the last generation that's disconnected. But through our information today, we hopefully that we can reconnect our generation by giving you some information, some inspiration, some education, and maybe a little entertainment. So let's start with Michelle from down in Atlanta, Georgia. Michelle, you're the public relations for the PIC TV network, and I'm from Washington, D.C. Michelle, growing up down in the South, there's a lot of things that you learned growing up, and we talked many, many, many times about one of the persons who helped raise you. She was up in her 90s. Talk about her.
Actually, she was 102, and Miss Helen Lewis just passed about 3 months ago.
Oh.
And so Mrs. Lewis was like my second mom. When we moved from Boston to Mississippi, my dad was in the Navy for 27 years. The Lewises were our designated families. That's when military people move, they normally put them with another family to help them acclimate to the town, especially back in the Jim Crow era. This way, this would allow them to find a steady base, a church home, and those things. And so when we moved from base, city of Meridian, our home caught on fire and we were burnt out. Mrs. Lewis was one of the people and the whole Lewis family, give my mom and my dad clothes and help us to get resettled and reacclimated into Meridian. And my best friend, Mrs. Lewis's daughter, Audrey, we've been friends for 59 years this year. We've been friends since we were 9 months old, and I will be 60 in July, and she'll be 60 in July as well. And so we still stay in touch. We still pray together. And her sisters are like my sisters, and her brothers are like my brothers, and vice versa. And so it's a whole family relationship we've had for many, many years. And I'm always proud to call her my friend. Thank you so much, Dr. Evans. And now back to you.
Wow, that's amazing. When I think about people who really sold into other people's lives, and 100 years old, I don't know how many people are going to make it these days with all this air, food, and water tore up, but that's a beautiful thing that you remembered what she stated in your life and how she paved the way. I believe kind acts should never be forgotten. I want to go over to talk to Pat from New York. Pat being our PIC TV network referral manager from New York. Pat, talk about how important it is for you growing up to know auntie and uncle and everybody coming together and gathering together as a family and making sure everybody was loving on each other and being there for each other. Talk about that, Pat.
You know what? Also, I like to talk about regarding that is the stories. And, I feel like people aren't sharing, like, that's what I'm noticing, like people aren't sharing legacy stories. And you know what? If somebody passes away, you don't know those stories anymore. And those stories are so important. So now, I try to remember to tell my kids stories because they might seem insignificant, but they're all part of one big puzzle, and I to be honest, I wish I would have learned even more stories. My grandparents were very good because they're older generation to always share great, wonderful stories. I wanted to know how they grew up. I wanted to know where they came from, and then stories of my parents and just keeping those stories going. And that's something that I see from generation to generation, that hearing those stories, especially the ones that weren't maybe such a big deal, but they can be significant. Like, I don't know, even cooking, traditional ways you cooked or traditional ways you passed time, during a weekend, before there was so many things to do. So yeah, sharing stories is one of my takeaways that I think should be brought back. Over to you, David.
Yeah, it's amazing how we have to pass down that legacy of those stories. You know, it's so important for us to realize that when we share those stories never die. I can remember my father before he passed away, Allison, he would always take us down in North Carolina, and we would go to Fayetteville. We would drive 7 hours, and he would take me back in the back of Aunt Cora's house. She had an outhouse. I don't know if you guys remember outhouse. I don't know if you remember outhouse.
Not in
for all the
California.
young people, for all the young people right here who looking at us who never heard of an outhouse, Michelle, Michelle, because you from down south. Michelle, tell them what an outhouse is, Michelle.
Well, if you didn't have indoor plumbing, that's where you went to the restroom. And if you're smart, you make sure you drink all your water before 7 o'clock. That way, especially in the summertime, you could go out there and go before the snakes and stuff come out, because you wouldn't want to have to try to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. That's why they made what we call chamber pots, because the ladies didn't want to go to the restroom outside. So they have a little place behind a partition where they could go to the restroom in the house. And that's the story of outhouses. I hated outhouses because you always had to lime them and everything, and they were like gross and grutty.
There's young people who never even heard of an outhouse. They see a party outside when it's a football game. But I see a coach, Gene, coming. Gene, why are you shaking your head? Tell me what you know about the outhouse, Gene. Gene, what you know about that?
I may be from New York originally and down here in Atlanta now, but I remember when my daddy used to take us down to Knoxville, Tennessee to visit my Nana, and having to go out the house to the backyard to the outhouse. You know, nowadays they call them porta johns, and we had them all in Iraq, but it's just the new millennial outhouse.
That was good.
Wow. Now, I might as well go to London, England. I know London, England don't know nothing about no outhouse. Now we got people popping in. Look at all these comments coming in. What do you know about that, Allison? Do you know anything about the outhouse?
You would be very surprised. Yeah. So yes, they did have outhouses back in the UK, and it used to, some of them that I've seen, not in my time or generation, fortunately, but some of them that I have seen, they were literally a brick outhouse, what some people now would call, or, you know, look at as their shed. But yes, that is where, and they didn't have like toilet paper. It was actually like newspaper cut into squares, and that is what was used. So yes, and not only that, being first generation British, my family are from Jamaica. So yes, I've also gone to Jamaica, and I've used, it's didn't have the fancy term of outhouse in Jamaica, though. That's not what they call them. In Jamaica, they call them the pit toilet, because it's literally like a wooden shed where a pit is dug quite deep, and then they build like the seat of the toilet. It's actually like made of wood, and it's built so that is where you would sit. So yes, I have experienced the outhouse, the nice fancy name for it. In my lifetime, yes, I have experienced that.
Wow. I'm telling you, I'm just like getting all these chats coming in from New York, Texas, California.
I'm the only one here that has not experienced it.
Nicole, let me get Nicole from California.
I'm the only one here that hasn't.
I'm sorry. Nicole, let me see. From California. Nicole is here from California. Nicole, have you ever heard of an outhouse in your day? Anything in that regard? Outhouse? I don't know.
No, I definitely have never used an outhouse, and I avoid. I can't even say it because I avoid porta potties at all costs. Like me and my whole family, we just wait. That's it. That's all I could say. We just wait. So no, that's not. We don't do that here. I'm sorry. We know what they are, though. We know what they are.
We didn't have the fortune to wait back in our day. Me and Michelle and Pat You know, and Gene, we didn't, and Allison, we couldn't wait. You know, we had to just let it go. You know, we had to do what we had to do. And that, I think this is one of the appreciations that we have. Back in our day, there was the potbelly stove. Before we had all of these things that we have now, they cooked on the potbelly stove. And some of the best food you want to eat was at Aunt Eunice's house down in Durham, North Carolina on Austin Avenue. Chickens running around, live chickens. You know, we had the best milkmaid. And it was just a wonderful time when we were growing up. We were young. We were poor. We didn't know we were poor. We slept in the same bed. Some of us peed in the same bed. You know, we played in the same bed. We did. I'm telling the truth. We grew up, and it was just so much love. You know, we were just a big old family together. You know, with our cousins, our nieces and nephews, and it was so important. And I want to pass this on over to Allison once again. It was so important for us to know our people. My mother and father, they made sure I knew who our Aunt Ruth was until the day she left this planet. Aunt Una till they left this planet. I knew who my aunts was and my uncles. Uncle Dougal from down in Red Springs, North Carolina. I'm only 7 years old. But they wanted us to know who our people were. Aunt Aura, who owns 10 blocks of land. Far as you can see. The government may have stole it, Michelle. But back in that day, my aunt owned so much land, you can build 10 malls on all that land she owned down south. And I wanted to pass this on to Allison. You know, to know your people, to make sure our moms and pops made sure we knew our people was so important to them, and too important to pass on to us. Come on, Allison, talk a little bit about that.
I completely agree with you. And as I mentioned, I'm first generation British. So my grandmother left Jamaica and went to England, bringing out over her, eventually she brought over all of her children, either to England or to the US. And in doing that, you can just imagine that there was family scattered everywhere that we wouldn't get to see, because back then you can imagine how much it would cost airfare to travel back to Jamaica, taking the children and so on. But having said that, it was still one of those things where we knew who our great grandparents were, and we knew the family tree and the history and things like that. And they made sure that we never forgot those things. And it's interesting that I believe every family has their historian. And mine was someone that we called her, before she passed away, her name was Emily, but we called her Aunt Dear. And if you wanted to know anything, how we were related to who, what, whatever, she's the one that could tell you, right, okay, so Janice, she was your uncle's sister's girlfriend's wife's boyfriend's sister's nephew. She was that one that could go all the way through and tell you who. And I loved listening to those. And those things were passed down to like my uncles and my mother. And so now when I look at it, like my mother's brothers and sisters, they're getting older, they're passing away. So it's down to my generation to learn now. And the good thing is, as we've gotten older, I think we really appreciate the value of knowing our lineage. We appreciate that. When we were younger, not so much, because we didn't have the understanding, because we were first generation. So we're in this whole completely different culture. We're exposed to this different culture. So we just like, oh, we don't want to hear about your stories from back home, because they seemed so archaic. But now that we're growing up and we're evolving, we want to know where we are from. We want to have that connection with our ancestry. And it's quite comical in one sense that things like ancestry.com and 123, all these things out there now where you can spit in a tube to find out who your ancestors and your cousins are, when if we only took the time to learn from our elders, we wouldn't need that, because we would have the information right there and we could then pass it on to our children and grandchildren. So it's very, very important to know. And it gives you a sense of belonging also. so that you feel that you have that connection, that belonging, and you that pride, especially when you can say, oh, my grandparents, they did this and they did that, and they were pioneers. That pride that you can feel in knowing that you have these connections. If we don't share, if we don't pass it on, unfortunately, that will be lost. Back to you, Dr. Evans.
Yeah, that's so true. Passing it on is so important, especially these days, the time where we're in this rat race. Everything is happening so fast. And our generation that we're in, we didn't have cell phones. We had to talk like we're doing now. We didn't have Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. We didn't have Clubhouse growing up, but we would travel miles and miles and miles just to see our loved ones and hold on to, what the love that we shared with them was just amazing. I'm talking about when we were young. I went to Philadelphia when I came out of high school in 1981 to stay with Aunt Ruth. She passed away now. And they were saying, why are you going up there? I just felt like I wanted to see my aunt. I'm going to spend the summer with my aunt the whole summer. So I went up there and stayed, caught the Amtrak by myself, stayed up in my aunt's house, and had a wonderful time. That meant so much to me. And one thing she taught me, Pat, she said, David, and I was like 16 years old, she said, make up your bed. Before you go out in the morning, make up your bed, because you'll never know when you'll be able to make it up when you come back home that evening. And for the last 50 some odd years, I've been making up my bed every morning. I'm religiously. I don't even like to walk out the room till I make up my bed, because my aunt spoke into my life, and I took that to heart. So it's important for us to take on, the traits of our generation. Something they did that paved the way for us.
Yep.
And I want to talk a little bit to you, Gene, a little bit more from being in Atlanta, Georgia. Gene, you travel in the military, have a wonderful husband and family. What are some of the things when you were growing up that you're still passing on to your kids today? Because you have kids.
So, yes, thank you so much for allowing me to share. I remember growing up, there was just some things that, tradition was one of them. And I think one of the other young ladies alluded to this earlier. But it was important for me to pass on tradition. And that's why when my children were growing up, they're all grown now. But when they were growing up, it was important to me, to have the family together for Sunday dinners, to celebrate Christmas during that time, and Thanksgiving, and just pass on some traditions that I did remember growing up with, even if it was just the tradition of the dinner, the tradition of how we celebrate birthdays and things like that. That was very important to me because I wanted something to pass on to my children. But one of the things I am really proud to say that I passed on to my kids was my faith, my belief in the Creator, as well as, back in the day, we had a community, right? And so when your mother was at work or whatever the case was, you had a community of neighbors and friends that looked out for you, that looked out for one another. And I think that sense of community is missing. And one of the things I try to instill in my kids is, no one is an island. We all need somebody else. We need one another. And so, we had that support system. My mother, raising us by herself after my parents, divorced. Hey, we had that to where we had those neighbors, Miss Fanny and all of them. We thought they were nosy growing up. But, they kept us straight, even when our parents wasn't around. But in that, was love there, and they looked out for us. And so that sense of community and belonging and let my kids know no one is an island. We all need somebody. And relationships are important, right? They are important. So that's what I passed on to my children. Back over to you, David.
Yeah, I'm just so blessed because you hit on something that we're going to talk about, and community. You know, the unity in the community when we were growing up, Pat, Gene, Allison, was just amazing. And also we had Pastor just joined us, Dunamis from Texas. When we were growing up, it was everybody knew each other in the whole block. I could name everybody in my block: Miss Horag, Mr. Brown, Miss Draper, Miss Drummer. I'm talking about 40 something years ago. I could still see them and still name them. Everybody on my block, maybe even on 10th Street, I can name them too. Mr. Lindsay, you know, everybody knew each other, you know. And I want to ask Michelle. There is a disconnect today. I live in a nice area right now, but I can't name 3 of my neighbors. You know, there's a disconnect today, Michelle. I mean, and you know how we talk. Is it because of these devices, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook Live, you know, all this stuff, artificial technology? Is something, what has that separated us, Michelle? Talk to us for a minute.
Well, it's not all technology. A lot of times when we've moved into new neighborhoods, we just have not gone to meet our neighbors. It used to be when somebody moved into the neighborhood, you took them a glass of water or a drink or a cake or something and said, "Hey, welcome to the neighborhood." You said hi. And now with the fear of just knowing who people are, and a lot of times it's just fear, because I do know my neighbors. I don't know them all, but I'm one of those people that's kind of gregarious. I talk to people in the line at the grocery store, you know, and so I do know a lot of my neighbors. I know a lot of people in my community, and they know me, but that's not always the case for other people. And sometimes it's just the fact that they might be a little, you know, off-put. I live in an area that's mixed. And so for me, it's really important to know my neighbors, because we do a lot of things. I do fundraisers. I help children. So it's good that we know each other to keep our children safe. All right, Dr. Evans, now back to you.
Yeah, I want to throw this out to let me see, Patricia, and I want to throw this out to Gene, and then we'll ask Pastor to come in too. With gentrification coming in, especially in Washington, D.C., the houses that we grew up in, that Mama had and Daddy had, are $1 million homes now, even in the slums, even in the lowest parts of the D.C. area. You know, Buzzard Point with one time. Now you have the Nat Stadium there, where a lot of Blacks were, and African Americans, let me say it that way, we were migrated in this area, and it was the projects. Not no more. There's $1 million apartments over there. You can't afford to come back if you leave, you know. So there's something happening. I don't know what's going on in Texas. I don't know what's going on in New York, but in DC, I'm telling you, it used to be Chocolate City. Now it's can't even be vanilla no more. You know, it's just a whole, everybody just in a whole different frame of mind when it comes to property here in DC. It's just amazing. Allison, let you talk about that for a minute. Allison, you know the area a little bit too.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's happening everywhere. It's because when I first was coming to DC, everybody was telling me about Chocolate City, and I had no idea what they were referring to. And so when they explained it to me, it's like, oh, okay. But then as I started to see certain things, I saw the parallels, because back in London, the same thing is happening. For example, if I talk about the area that I grew up in, the area that I grew up in is notorious for crime. And at one point in time, in the 90s or early 2000s, that area was at one point called the gun capital of London. Now, bearing in mind, guns are not legal in the UK. So can you imagine, it's called the gun capital of London and guns are not legal. You can't just go and get a permit and have your, what do you got them? The stores I saw were guns and pawn shops, and you don't have that. You have to have either a hunting rifle or be in a job like the SWAT team or special forces to have a gun. So for it to be called the gun capital of London, however, you can't afford to buy a house there. Why is that? And that there's a disconnect there. And there's other areas, as you mentioned, Dr. Evans, around London, in South London, North London, Northwest London, that the gentrification is astonishing, because they used to be called, they were the notorious areas that they were predominantly Caribbean and African neighborhoods. Because as I mentioned, most of us in the UK, my age group, are first generation British. But yet, if you go there now, when I go to some of these areas now, I'm thinking, did I take a wrong turn somewhere? And a little bit like that station in Harry Potter, where I've ended up in a completely different world, because it's unrecognizable to what it was. And it would be great if they were doing these things and helping the existing communities, but they're driving them out. And that is what I find so heartbreaking almost, because the way that they're driving them out, so they're not improving the areas for the existing people that have lived there 10, 20, 30, 40 years and more. They're doing it because now it's an up and coming area. They're £1 million houses. And the unfortunate thing is, £1 million doesn't buy you very much in London anymore. It really, really doesn't. So to your point, Dr. Evans, yes, I've seen it in the US, I see it in the UK, and it is very frightening, to be very honest with you. So, and I know that he mentioned, Jean, that he wanted to ask you the same question.
Yeah. You know what, and Michelle could probably attest to this. You see it here in Atlanta too. I've seen the city of Decatur over there in DeKalb County. I've only been retired from the Army for almost a year now, but we've had this house here in McDonough for years. And I've seen over the years, every time I would come back home, how even in Decatur, DeKalb County, the neighborhoods have changed, and how they tore down a lot of the old houses, especially around the high school my husband used to teach at. He's JROTC at Decatur High School. How they tore all those projects down and rebuilt those homes, more modern homes. And you see other cultures, people from the other persuasion, now living in these neighborhoods where projects was, and where, other African Americans lived. And even here, many people are moving back into the city because the traffic here is horrible, right? No one wants to travel from the burbs anywhere 20 to 30 miles outside of Atlanta city limits into the city to work. So what are they doing? Here comes the gentrification, right? To appease a certain culture, a group of people. And so certain cultures are moving back into the city because of the traffic. They don't want to deal with it, traveling back and forth from the burbs every day. But what's happening is it's moving out the people who have lived in these areas, in these neighborhoods for generations even. So yeah, that is so true, and it is frightening. And so back over to you, Dr. Evans.
Michelle, I always ask you the hard questions. I always throw you the hard curveballs. I always, because you are public relations persons, and I know you can handle it. First of all, when you look at our culture, our people, especially in Washington, D.C., are we in trouble because of the school system? When I went back to my high school, I was unbelievable. In 1981, my principal was Mr. Jones. He was an African American. 99% of the teachers were African American. When I go back 40 years later, there's none. I was just, it was, and my school looked like a mall. It looked like a upper class mall. Michelle, are we in trouble? Because where do we go if you're driving the African American? If I don't want to say it like that, I'm gonna make sure I'm saying it right. If gentrification is coming in, and African Americans, where do we go? Where do we go, Michelle?
Well, first things first. Let's think about what happened in Atlanta, because I was here. I worked for the Georgia Railroad, and we worked in conjunction with MARTA to build a rail system. Now, we went to all the counties and asked all the counties, can we bring the rail system out? This way, they had been thinking of this, when we're talking about 30 some odd years ago. I was 18 when I worked on the railroad. So almost 40 years ago. All the counties said no. And at the time, the cost would have been minute compared to what it would be today to build it. Then we got the Olympics. So during the Olympics, they deemed that all the housing projects were eyesores. And what they did was they gave people that were in the projects chances to get housing other places. They had to get vouchers for the people that understood the process, but they tore all that down. So if you go into Atlanta now, even though they have all this gentrification and they've got all these new buildings, you see a lot of homeless people because they didn't think of or make a way for these people to really reintegrate back into the society. And that's the problem we have. And not that it's anybody's problem. Let me be perfectly clear. We as a people have to get together and work on a solution, because we can't wait for somebody else to bring us a solution. But as we do that, we have to bring attention to the plight of those that were literally pushed to the side for growth. And that's what we're having in not only this city, in a lot of major cities. They forget about other people when we're a country that we don't have to have homeless. It makes no sense with all the wealth we have that we have homeless. But again, as the pandemic has proved, who are the essential workers? Those are the people that put food on the table every day, that stock the shelves and all these things. And so now, as we see these things, the wages are starting to come up and we're bringing more people into it. Is it going to take a while for us to adjust? Absolutely. Will it stop gentrification? No. But because we have these subjects on the table, what can happen now is we can have these conversations and work for solutions. And we can make these solutions. We cannot wait for other people, other cultures to make these solutions. We have to address these hard questions ourselves and start to work together to bring our families back together and bring our communities back. Dr. Evans, I yield the floor. Back to you.
Pat, I'm going to throw it to New York. Pat,
I agree with what Michelle is saying. There's no reason why this is even happening. And, you know, before you asked Michelle that question, I exactly was thinking the same question, like, where are all these people going? You know, they're getting pushed out. And I remember the first time really being aware of this was when they were talking about Silicon Valley. They did that in Silicon Valley. And now the homeless are just miles and miles of homeless. It's ridiculous. It's like, and really, I feel like it's ridiculous that there's any slums to begin with. There should be no reason for that. Those people should not be relocated. There should be incentives to make that community as best as it could, because everybody has a way to provide and create that community, are those options being given? Are they being presented? Are they being given? It's ridiculous. It doesn't, just like we were talking about the food, remember, they're able to make farms on top of roofs. So there is no excuse. If you can make a farm on top of a roof, there's no excuse for it. There are ways around it. So yeah, back to you, David.
Wow. This is really, our numbers are going up. People are coming in from everywhere. We're going to take a commercial break, and I'm going to have Pastor Dunamis to come in from Texas and ask him some of the questions. We're talking about reconnecting the generation. Most of us are in our early 30s or early 40s or early 50s and maybe 60s. So we live through timelines, and we want to pass some things down, that we learned growing up that will help our generation and help our people. We see all your chats in from YouTube, from Facebook. All these chats are popping in. Hopefully we'll get to some of those too, but we're going to have a commercial break and we're going to come right back right after this. Thank you for your time, everybody. Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in once again. We on the PIC TV network. Our network is on right now, and we are so happy to beam this presentation all the way from the nation's capital to New York City, all the way down to Atlanta, Georgia, down to Texas, and we also had it in California. So we're happy for all of you who are watching the PIC TV network. Our news world channel is up, popping, and rocking. We thank you again for watching with us. Brazil, France, Argentina, Nicaragua, United States, Colombia, Mexico, Guatemala, United Kingdom is in the house. We've Allison from the UK is with us. Thank you, Panama. Thank you, Ireland, Peru, Chile, and the rest of the world. Everybody's watching. I want to bring in one of our pastors who's on from Texas. Pastor Dunamis is on with us today. He's in a location. He might be traveling a little bit, but just wanted to bring him in on and get Texas' view of if gentrification happening down there like it's happening in Washington, D.C., New York, Atlanta, and the big cities. African Americans, our people. How do we continue to stay together, keep property, take ownership, do some things that we can have? Pastor Dunamis, let me bring you in, sir, so you can talk a little bit to us. The floor is yours.
Hey man, greetings to everybody. I'm actually in my car. I'm trying to navigate here. Y'all gotta excuse me. My reception wasn't all that great. Greetings and grace to you. Blessings and grace to everybody. I think there's a shift that is happening, but I think there needs to be more work done for obvious reasons. We have children having babies that are having babies, right? We're having people that are kind of insecure about their career-driven purpose, let alone just in general, the lack of mentorship in the local communities. For example, Oak Cliff, Dallas, downtown Dallas area. It's lacking, especially because of the pandemic, of course. So, I see it from a lot of different lenses, but moving forward, I really believe that the virtual space, for example, Clubhouse, IG, Instagram, that is a very powerful tool, y'all. And we have to use it on a level where we can leverage it in order to reach those people to where they really are, right? Not just where they're kind of, I want to do this and that. People are so excited that they don't do nothing, right? They're so excited that they don't take action, right? It's like, what are we really doing, right? How are we really impacting people to where they really are? I'm not talking about just maybe 1 or 2 days you work with them and then you leave them and you neglect them. I'm talking about consistency, right? Consistent follow-up, consistent nurturing, consistency. That is so powerful. There's so much power in consistency that it can either make you or break you or shape you or deform you. Yeah. So I'm not gonna get too deep in here because I'm not preaching. I promise you. I did that all day today. I'm not gonna do that now. But I just want to throw that out there because I really like the conversational piece towards that and how we're actually strategizing and finding ways to be creative and to actually help people on a virtual space, because there is a lack, but there is a strategy behind it. Yeah.
Thank you, Pastor. That's amazing. Listening to you, I think we have to take a stand and have our young people to talk about politics and also get them into the meetings for the reconstruction for the next 5 to 10 years. My niece Angel, she works on the committee at Ward 5. So we have to push our young people to be in the meetings and to have positions of power. I like what Michelle was saying. In 1981, I just came out of high school, and I didn't know about life. I was just doing my thing like all of the young people were doing. But I didn't know they were strategizing for the next 20 to 30 years because I never went to a meeting. I didn't know there was a meeting going on with the neighborhood watch or neighborhood rehabilitation or the community action meeting for the next 20 years. I never knew that, but somebody knew and they were planning it. So I think one of the things that we can do in reconnecting the generation is to get our young people, our sons and our daughters, our cousins and nieces and nephews that are in the age of 20 on down, start teaching them right now. Go into those meetings, be in those meetings, make your decisions, because your decision is going to help us as we go forward for the next 20 years, 2020, 2030, 2040. You know, so we have to do that. There is a mass exodus working downtown at the United States Housing and Urban Development, downtown Washington, D.C. As I stated, I can walk out of one building and be at the Department of Treasury. I can walk 2 blocks and be at the monument. I can walk 3 blocks and be at the Capitol. Everything down there is changing so fast. And where there was a buzzer point down at the wharf, and everybody in D.C. knows it, this was a place you can just go and sit down, and condos. It looks like a baby Miami down there now. All the high-rise buildings, skyrockets, places, skyscrapers. I mean, and you have to have $1 million plus to live there. Easy. So somebody came in, like Pat said, with a whole different building strategy. And they put multi-billion dollars for and that place is, Pat, at least 12 blocks long, down by the water, 12 blocks long.
Wow.
And, yeah, 12 blocks long. So this was where we were. Southwest Buzzer Point, no more. No more, Pat. No more, Gene. No more, Allison. It's not like that no more. And again, where do our people go? Gene, talk a little bit about that. Where do our people go?
So yeah, that that is the $50 million question. But what I really want to say is, what you said and what the pastor alluded to gives us, a hint, if you will. It really gives us the next step in where we need to go. Consistency has been a key word with me lately, because without consistency, how do we even push the movement? Because there has to be a movement, and it's got to start somewhere. So the consistency is the key, right? But then again, where do we go from here? I talk to my kids all the time, and they're in their late 30s. My oldest son is like 42 now. It's got, if we're going to continue this movement from generation to generation, as a nurse, I speak of health, right? So if we're going to it's got to become a legacy. It's got to become a part of who we are. It's something, it has to be instilled within our children and in our children's children. Some of us are grandparents, right? Great grandparents. We have got to get this generation, our children involved, our children's children involved, because it's just like leaving your family a legacy of health, and you pass family health history from one generation to another, which is another thing that no longer exists. But it's got to be instilled in our children now, and then they instill it in their children, and so forth and so forth. Because if we do not leave a legacy of some semblance of a movement, like, it's time now for the movement. We have got to instill in this generation, so that it continue on, that there is this urgency. It's important. It has to become a part of who we are if we are going to go forward, move forward, and continue to progress and see the change that we want to see for generations to come. We have to be the change, and then we have to pass it on. It has to become a legacy. And so I'm going to pass it back over to you, Dr. Evans.
Pastor Dunamis, I know you're in a different area, Doc. When we were growing up, there was an area in Columbia Heights where Spanish and Puerto Ricans would be. There was a Black area where we would be Northwest DC, Southwest DC, Northeast DC. There was a Caucasian area, Rockville, Bethesda, Potomac, Maryland, Tysons, Virginia, McLean, Virginia. Now you don't know what's what. You know, after you got to come back to Pat for to Michelle, because Michelle can handle it. But the question is, Michelle, again, and I ask you guys, where do we go? If we're pushed out, where do we go? When I talked to the director of education about 3 years ago, we were in the studio in DC. He said all the schools in trouble. He said every school in DC, Dunbar, Roosevelt, Cardozo, they're in trouble. This is the superintendent. And I said, what do you mean? Graduation rate is this. This is going on this. Our kids are not taking it serious. When we hear that, Pastor Dunamis, give us some hope, man. Give us some hope, Doc.
You know, it kind of alarms me to even hear you say that, because we as leaders, as spiritual leaders, should be at the forefront of leadership, right? We should be at the forefront of strategy, right? We should be at the forefront of infiltrating a system where they can go not only just to their parents, but to their coaches, to their community leaders, or to their tutors. We need more tutors in the community that like I'm talking about life tutors and curriculum tutors, right? When you have a solid emergency tutor that can show up and say, hey, you know what? Okay, where's your mom at? Okay, are you good? Oh, okay, just call me if you need anything. Because at the end of the day, and this is good, I'm glad we're talking about this, because most students that are in those situations either are from a foster home situation or a battered home situation, right? They're either going through a family crisis. They need a life tutor, an emergency life tutor, or a spiritual leader that can step up. Now, I'm not just talking about the pastors or the elders. I'm talking about a person that can say, okay, yeah, that's my Sunday school teacher's friend, and she is our life coach. She's our overall go-to tutor, meaning that we can turn to her or him when life happens, right? When life happens, we can go right to them. Most of the time, the leaders and the pastors are out of touch because they're doing so many different things in the church. We need to be more hands-on. We need to be direct, meaning that, okay, where's your mom at? Where's your dad at? Oh, by the way, I know you're older. I know you're 20 and 22, but you don't have a home cooked meal all the time because they might have lost a family member, even in prison, or maybe in something that happened, and we don't know the real story, but they need an emergency contact because, you know, even like with Oak Cliff, in Oak Cliff, it's rough down there, and some people don't even have anything as far as resources other than just Section 8 housing. All right, so it's super important. It's very important that we have a life emergency coach, or maybe like a life emergency tutor, or somebody that we can say, okay, bam, we can go to them. Have maybe like a community of those people, like maybe like a center, a hope center, if you will, or something that can cater to the needs, the real emergency needs of the community. If you infiltrate that, that's a very good strategy. That way the government can fund it, right? The government can fund it. It's almost like the Center of Hope or something like that, for battered women or something of that nature, or you know, something that can kind of infiltrate real change, like indirectly but subtly, right? I think that would be interesting from that lens, Dr. Evans.
Yeah, you said it right. We're gonna have to go to part two, but I want to ask Pat before we close off this segment, going to segment two, and I want to ask Allison. You know, when you talk about mentors and we're talking about community leaders, as Michelle said, when we first opened up, she had somebody she could go back who died 100 years old, was that she looked up to. We are the ones. We are the ones who are leaders. The Miss Rainey's who were on our block, Mr. Horag, Mr. Brown. They corrected me. if they saw me walking down the street in school time, Dave, what you doing? You know, supposed to go to school, sir. Everybody was accountable when we were coming up. The whole neighborhood, Pat, they knew us. They knew us. We were covered from Spring Road to 14th Street to 11th Street to Georgia Avenue. You know, there were leaders and role models. You know, they were nosy rosies, but they were looking out. So, you know, David, they go to school. David, he all right. We need those nosy rosies, Pat. Come on, Pat, talk to us for a minute before we close out, and then we're going to Alice. Take it off mute, Pat. Take it off mute.
It's okay. It's sorry about that. So what I was thinking when Pastor was talking, what I was thinking also what came to mind was, yes, there needs to be a mentor for the kids that, but then I'm thinking, go even deeper. Like there needs to be a mentor for those family members that are creating those bad environments for those kids, you know? And again, like where do you go? Where does it start? Like, where does it begin? You know, it's like, can you find the root of the problem? Just like if you're doing math, right, Michelle? If you're doing math, you find what is the root of the problem. Go deeper than just the kid that needs the help. Why does that kid need help? Deeper and deeper, you know, and that would be an amazing thing if, as a community, hey, I hear trouble in that house. Let me go knock and see if she needs a friend. You know, because I don't think she has any family around and she doesn't seem like she's in a good place and she has a kid, you know, stuff like that. I think back in the day, again, the difference between the new generation and the old generation, since this is the topic at hand, the new generation is kind of like, I'm going to mind my business, you know, but the old day, it was like, I'm going to make it my business. Just like you said, Mr. Brown's going to stop you. What are you doing today? Well, what are you doing in the street? Just must be in school, you know? So I feel like, you know, I think it's time to step it up again and step in a little bit. Yeah, everybody should have their lines you don't cross, but don't be so afraid to, you know, make something your business if something tells you, you know, you should look into this. So that's what I have to say about it. Over to you, David.
Yeah, I want to go to Allison. Allison, the correction that we were coming up, like I said, everybody in the community, especially the elderly, they was watching out for us. We didn't have to have the police. We had the nosy rosies, and they were watching out for us and correcting us. And we took the correction. We listened to Miss Rainey, Mr. Draper, you know, Mr. Horag. We listened to all of them. Mr. Brown. We listened to. They may be dead and gone, but I can still know those names today. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's quite interesting as well, because one of the things is the fact if one of them went and told my mum, I was more scared of that than anything else, because it was you got in trouble for what you did, and then you got in trouble for the fact that somebody had to come and tell her. So there was that part. And there's a couple of points. It's something that Pastor, you mentioned. Now, back in the 90s, I got involved in a mentoring program, and it was a great initiative that was put on. But when you say that the government should fund it, guess what? When the funding ran out, guess what happened? That no longer existed. So I don't believe we can actually rely on the government. We have to come together and we have to save our children. We have to save our communities, because the scheme that we were in, these children had to volunteer themselves. They weren't coerced into it. They had to sign up. And I was partnered with a young lady. And to your point about when they can't find the parents, she had an issue with her exams at school. They called me. So she did have that person, me, as her mentor. But the problem was the funding ran out. And not only that, when the government funds it, they have a certain element of saying how you run it. That's why we need to fund our own initiatives and take care of our own children. And then something you mentioned, Pat, we are too busy dealing with the symptoms. We're not checking to find out what is the cause. And if we don't deal with the cause, it's going to be a continual cycle. Pastor, you know about this. generational curses, right? Or some people don't like to hear the word curses. So it's what? Generational cycles. If we do not deal with the root cause, these things will continue to happen over and over again. We need to dig it out at the root. The axe needs to be laid at the root. That's some of the things that we need to do. And then another thing, you know why a lot of people, I feel, don't get involved anymore? Because sometimes you try to correct somebody's child and that person's up in your face telling you to leave their child alone. So it puts people off from them thinking, you know something, the last time I tried to step in and help, the way that woman told me about myself and called me out of my name and everything, I'm going to leave you and your children to it. And that's a shame, because that's not how we came up. We didn't come up that way. We came up in that whole thing where if you were doing something and you saw an elder coming, you stopped quick, fast, and in a hurry what you were doing, because you didn't want the elder to see. Many times the elder didn't even need to speak to you because you knew they were coming and you stopped. So there's so many things that we need to bring back, but we also need to bring it back in a different way. We cannot rely on others to do for us or fund for us. We need to find ways to say, okay, how are we going to do this? So Dr. Evans, back to you.
We're going to close out this segment. I'm going to ask Michelle, as we most likely do most of the time before I close out. And we don't go into part two. We're coming back in part two, so you guys can stay tuned. We got so many comments coming in from San Francisco, California, to North Carolina, to New York, all over the place popping in, and many, many more people are commenting on this segment today. Michelle, before we close out this segment today, I wanted to ask you the question that is, I don't know. I feel so bad because of the fact that we living in 2021 and all the beautiful things that mom and dad, my parents are gone. They died to pass on everything they had to give to us, to give us something better than what we had, Michelle. And when I look around today at our generation or the next generation behind us, it's like they don't care. Don't judge me. I'm gonna do what I want to do. It's my time. You know, I got mentors on Twitter. I got mentors on Instagram. I got mentors on Live Me. I got mentors, and I always ask you this, Michelle: is this a danger to us? Were we closer before we got this, Michelle? Now that we got this, is it really bringing us together or separating us, Michelle? I always ask you this. Is this thing, even COVID-19, are we closer together, or our home is still separated, still hate each other for being in the same place? It takes too long. Come on, Michelle.
Well, Dr. Evans, let's look at all the factors, and I'm going to take you back. Now, we were supposed to get 40 acres in a mule. That legislation was passed, but when Andrew Jackson came in, he ripped all of that back. So all those people built from nothing. Literally, they got nothing. The freedmen, they got nothing. So we turned it around and we started building successful communities. Well, what happened when we built those successful communities? People did not want to see Black people upwardly mobile. So they went in and burned us out. We talk about from 1919 to 1921, there were only over 50 wealthy communities of color that were burnt to the ground. There were race riots, there were massacres, all kinds of things that were going on. So let's put that there first, okay? Then eventually, as we got, as people started to see the plight, government started to see the plight, they tried to come in and put up housing. But what they did was, okay, you could have Section 8 housing, but we don't want you to have a husband in the house, or we don't want you to have a male in the house. That's whole separation, the same thing we had when we had slavery, where they were selling us off, or selling off the husbands, selling off the wives, selling off the children. So we have fathers separated from their children. Then we're put in menial jobs. Every time we try to go and say we want to join a union, or we wanted to unionize, or we wanted to get better wages, they have pigeonholed a lot of Black people into menial jobs. When you have menial jobs, you have a limited way of creating wealth. I'm not saying that you can't, because we know that Mrs. Ola from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, that washed laundry for someone else, saved $150,000 to send a child to college. But the thing of it is are we going along the wrong path? Because college isn't the end all be all for wealth. And we can't control our destinies until we can control our own wealth. And that's why I want everybody to think right now, if all the black people everywhere in the United States put in $5, we could turn our communities around. We could buy our communities. We could buy land. It's being done. Black Wall Street is coming back. Right here in Stonecrest, Georgia, they bought 96 acres of land, and they're rebuilding and building houses and spaces. So this can be done. We have to get off the mentality that the government's going to fix it. Can they help us? Absolutely. But we have to take the reins. And is it technology that's hurting us? Not always. Technology now has allowed us to have access to people that we hadn't had access to before. The thing about it is, it's like anything else. We have to be totally accountable for who we are all the time. Now, as a young person, my job was, I wanted to get out of Meridian, Mississippi. I thought it was the armpit of the world. Number one, because I grew up in Jim Crow. They killed James Chaney. They killed civil rights workers that were coming through there. They were still hanging people. If you know anything about the Devil's Punch Bowl, that's when the Union Army, not the Confederate Army, the Union Army, after the whole revolt, they were working people and killing them in Natchez, Mississippi, down in this gully. So I didn't want to have anything to do with Mississippi, and I tried to leave. I didn't leave my community behind. I left that feeling of dread being in Jim Crow. But I go back. Now, would I live in Mississippi again? I say not. I'm going to be totally transparent. But that doesn't mean that I can't reach out and help. And I do. I go back, I volunteer, I mentor. But at the same time, where we are, if we can do the United Negro College Fund every year and fund HBCUs, we can fund communities and get ourselves back on track. Dr. Evans, back to you.
Wow. I mean, every time I listened to you, Michelle, while we were off, I was like a person looking at the thing. I couldn't turn it off. I was like, wow, this is awesome. You know, I think this is one of the reasons why we have to have our own network, so we can write our own story and our own news coverage. Gene, when you was talking from Atlanta, Georgia, then passed from Texas, and Allison all the way from London, England, and Pat from New York, and Michelle from Atlanta. We have to have our own news stories. This is our version of the news, reconnecting our generation. One of the things when we first met, Michelle said, Dr. Evans, I have to support this network. I have my own business. I'm doing what I need to do, but I have to support this network because I'm tired of seeing Black people killing each other. I'm tired of looking at the news and seeing the stereotype of this type. We didn't talk about one thing negative on our news story today. We were talking about building each other up and bringing unity back in the community. Our news story was here to educate, to inspire, to edify. And this is why we have our own news coverage on the PIC TV network. Hey, we're going to go out. You know, I know some of you have been rolling with us, and we're going to come back and do part 2. We're so happy for all of you who've been watching with us and staying with us this time that we've been having this presentation. It's been an awesome journey. This is our 4th segment. We're gonna keep this connection till we connect some more people. We're gonna bring some of our young people on, let them talk a little bit, because we have to do our part. The Bible says, train them up in the way they should go. When they get old, they will not depart. And I believe the seeds that we planted tonight are going to fall on good ground. And we're going to have young people in power positions to make a change. Hey, until next time, everybody, thank you for watching the PIC TV Network, our News World channel. We're going to come back on our next session. Bye-bye.
Excuse me. She's been like crying for hours.
Sorry, but this is a group for new mothers.
On that sign out there, it says parents. I'm a parent and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Girl's got some stuff flying out her ass and she can either hit you with a streamer or she'll buckshot you. It's a quick whop. I need help.
I don't know how you're gonna do this.
If you could have only one parent, I wish you could have had your mom. Because she would have been better at it.
And mommy was the best.
Go to sleep, Maddie. Maddie, go to sleep. Maddie, go to sleep. Go to sleep, Maddie.
It's not working though. Well, she's not a clapper.
Matthew, darling, we think you should move back to Minnesota. You're all alone here. She needs family. Raising a child, it's a non-stop, all day, all night affair.
You look great. Don't say it just to be saying it. You look like a king. King in a sling.
Wake up, Daddy! How does it look?
I think it's a new look. I think it's a new hairstyle that can catch on if given a chance.
Mr. Logan, Madeline doesn't have a mother to model after.
I am well aware of what my daughter doesn't have.
You think you can do this, but you can't.
No, man, you're right. I can't do it. But you know what? I'm going to do it because I'm a father. God, Maddie. Thank God today I got there in time to hold her hand. With Liz, I didn't get to hold her hand. She was gone.
It's always just us. Other people have more people.
I just want to do what your mom would have wanted me to do.
You are trying to make everything perfect. But we don't have any control.
Wherever you are, I want to go there.
Wherever you are, I want to go there too.
Somebody's cutting onions or something close to us or something. I don't know.
Hey, y'all gotta stop it! Oh.
She would be so proud of you.
Two kisses. One for mommy. One for me.
Hold on to me.
Stay close. Don't be scared.
Oh! He okay, Maddie? Yeah.
I've been a good enough father. I don't want to be a good enough father.
Let's go, let's go!
The town's oldest manufacturing plant is closing its doors.
Most of my players have parents that work at the plant. This ain't gonna be pretty.
I'm down 3 coaches, but I do think I have a solution for cross country.
No, I don't even like running.
Don't die. Don't die.
Cross country's not even a real sport.
Why would anyone want to do this?
I'm just impressed that you finished.
You are my best option.
Y'all here for tryouts?
No, sir. We're just hanging out.
Hey, are you here for cross country?
Yes, sir.
I had one girl show up and she's got asthma.
Oh, you mean Hannah Scott. Do you enjoy running?
It's really the only thing I'm good at.
Why have a season with one runner?
One runner matters.
Thomas, you got time for a visit?
Hello, coach. So you changed force, and you still got no team. Well, that's sad even for me.
I get it. You have to coach cross country, but it's not the end of the world.
For someone who knows the Lord, you're acting like somebody who doesn't.
You give some very inspirational speeches to your players about stepping up under pressure and going the extra mile.
Anna, you're getting faster.
Your life is worth so much more than this.
To who?
When you find your identity in the one who created you, it'll change your whole perspective. Something or someone will have first place in your heart.
Where's your team?
She's right there.
What have you allowed to define you?
Is that?
That's Hannah.
Run, Hannah!